This episode of Saturday Morning Trek is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and to help Trek FM at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the non-profit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org. And if you want to join the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode, join the Babel Conference, our listener group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
This is DC Fontana. You're listening to Trek FM.
Get set now for action and adventure. Future's here for us to see. It's 2200 AD.
Their mission, to fight injustice, to right that which is wrong, and
to boldly go where no man has gone before.
Welcome to Saturday Morning Trek. Join us at Trek FM as we harken back to the days of wood panel dens, console televisions, and Baron von Redberry versus Sir Grapefellow. I'm Aaron Harvey.
I'm Adam Drosin.
So, Adam, it is nearly cereal season.
It is cereal season. It's the spookiest time of year. It's my favorite holiday, which is Halloween. And all of the fantastic treats and tricks that come with it. My favorite, of course, being the monster cereals. The most famous, I think everyone knows, Count Chocula. I think Count Chocula is the only one who sort of transcended the Halloween season. He's in some places, if not nationwide, he's available almost year round.
Yeah, Boo Berry was for a while. I think into the 80s we had those monster cereals. Fruit Brute, though, I think was only in the 70s until it came back.
Fruit Brute and Yummy Mummy.
Yeah, Yummy Mummy. I forgot about that.
I love this shit.
So,
Excuse me. I love this stuff so much. It's obscene. Like,
well, it's weird because it's fall in Los Angeles. There's a nip in the air, which I know people don't think that there's actually a season in Los Angeles, and that doesn't mean that it's not going to be 100 degrees in a week or something like that. But right now, it's got a sweatshirt on. It's
my new TNG 30 hoodie.
There you go.
Got it at STLV.
And we can actually shut the door to the wood panel den and not have a total meltdown with the computer running. So I'm excited. I think we're definitely going to do a serial episode because, as we were talking about before we started recording, that's a big part of cartoons in the 70s.
It's a big part of cartoons for kids, I think, at any era. It's like Saturday morning. I don't know what it is. Kids get up so early on Saturday mornings. It's just because
it's something you can fix for yourself too. Your parents don't have to help you.
Yes.
You dump a bunch of stuff into a bowl and throw milk on it.
Yes, exactly. So that's definitely a big part of it.
Or you just eat it out of the box without milk.
Yeah. So I mean, you guys heard me on one podcast before eating Frankenberry with my bare hands, which is definitely a high point.
I think that Frankenberry just vanished because when we were done, it was like, oh, there's none left.
Yeah,
we inhaled it.
I felt kind of bad about it, but
not so much.
Not at all, honestly.
I wonder if there's going to be any special. Did you hear any this year? If they're going to pull out like a Yummy Mummy or something like that? Because last year it was like it was all vote based. It was all like the election.
Oh, yes, that's true. You know what I saw that they're doing this year? That is funny. I just remember that. Yeah, like Frankenberry was holding up his peace signs like a Nixon, like I'm not a crook. That was great. No, I don't think they're bringing back Fruit Brute and Yummy Mummy. But what I saw they're doing this year with the characters is they are all dressing up as each other for Halloween.
Oh, interesting.
So even the Pillsbury Doughboy is getting in on the action. He's dressed up like Frankenberry, and Count Chocula is dressed up like Boo Berry, and like they all switch costumes essentially. It's kind of fun, and yeah, I don't know why. I think it's because I also do love all the Universal monsters, the classic monsters, right, which I've mentioned before on the show with. We're talking about Bob Klein, yeah. So, Frankenstein, Creature from Black Lagoon, Invisible Man, Mummy, Wolfman, all those guys. I just think it doesn't get better than that. The classic monsters. You said it's getting to be chilly. Everyone's I don't know. Halloween's the best, guys. Hit me up on Twitter. Hit me up on the Babel Conference. Let me know what you're dressing up as this year. What you're dressing your kids up as. Last year I was a Star Trek character. I was Lieutenant Shelby from TNG from Best of Both Worlds. Yeah, check me out on Twitter. You can see the pictures. It's great, but.
Yeah, we could actually combine the serial, if it's kind of talking about fall. We could talk about some of the those classic Star Trek kids costumes that you get that were like just a plastic sheet basically that you put on, and then the Spock mask on top or whatever. So it was not so much a costume; it was more like a walking poster of like the the logo and the picture of the character, and then you had the face. And
that
you couldn't
like,
see through
plastic smock. I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like creepy in a way, but it's also awesome and a really low rent.
Almost like much like a butcher or something like that. It feels like it's
exactly
some kind of smock where you could murder somebody here.
Exactly. Which I mean, Halloween. That's the time of year. But here's my horrible Trekkie confession. So #Trekkie confessions. Not to date myself, but I was a kid in elementary school, the era when you would be trick or treating unironically or dressing up not that I say I dress up unironically now, but anyway, not to date myself. I was a kid when First Contact was in theaters, and this was also
so young.
It's tragically young and getting older every day. That was the same time that the Star Wars theatrical special edition re-releases were in theaters. And as has been stated before on this and other podcasts, I was not a Star Trek kid as a kid. But that year, I guess it must have been Halloween 1996 or possibly 97. I went trick-or-treating with my friend. I was C-3PO and he was Picard. And if I could go back in time, I would slap that stupid C-3PO mask off my head, tell him to change costume.
Be Data.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't wear the mask anyway because it was like you said. It wasn't that level of like 70s or 80s like smock plastic, but it was like the stupid rubber mask was so hot. It's like like my mom was mad at me. I was like, I didn't make the costume.
That's funny. I think that year, 96, 97. No, at 97 I was Robin Hood. I think. But shortly after that, I was the emergency design hologram for my office. So I was like basically wearing just a TNG uniform, or I mean a Voyager era uniform, and I made out of what is it, the foam core and stuff like that. I made like the little hologram thing, and and I made some lines of it's like, oh, I see, you activate me to do banners. Is that it? That's my lot in life now. Got to do that early Doctor when he was still confined to the sick bay without his mobile emitter sort of shtick. So
yeah,
that was fun.
That's great. I mean. And the thing of Robin Hood was big in the 90s. I mean, you had not only Robin Hood Prince of Thieves, the Kevin Costner movie, but Robin Hood Men in Tights. That was great too. But hit us up on social, guys. Let us know if you're gonna dress up for Halloween, if you're doing a Trek costume, and I want to see them pics. Let me
and if you have pictures of you in the 70s, send it to us, and we will definitely put that together something when we do our Halloween episode, and we'll send those out and share with everybody.
70s, 80s, 90s, any era when Trek was in vogue, and you had your Trek costume, and I don't know. I don't even care. Send me your non-Trek costumes. I just love Halloween culture.
Yeah, it's jokingly, it's the gay Christmas. I've heard that before. You've got
it's true, and I think the fun thing about it is like so many holidays are tied to social obligations, or religious obligations, or I mean, even like the non-heavy holidays or socially, dense holidays, like something like Valentine's Day. Like, that Valentine's Day is upsetting for a lot of people. You know what I mean?
It can be, yes.
You're right. So I think like Halloween's something that's like, always going to be fun. So get ready for some more Halloween coverage coming from Saturday Morning Trek in the coming month or two.
Definitely. Well, and related to some coverage, which is not as pleasant, unfortunately, we were talking about Len Wein, who recently passed away, unfortunately.
Yeah, we lost one of the greats this month, guys. Really upsetting.
He, I'll let you talk about kind of the other things that he's done, but as far as Star Trek goes, he was an author of a lot of the Gold Key comics from 71 and 72. He did like issue 9 through 16, including the Museum at the End of Time, which, you know, nobody knows for sure, but it feels very much like the person who wrote The Time Trap just sort of whole cloth lifted that story and tweaked a few things, and it ended up on animated series a year later. And also in the 80s, he worked on the DC Star Trek comics. He did I don't remember what it was, but it was like in the 30s and 40s number issues.
He wrote a really good one with the late great Kurt Swan penciling. Okay. Kurt Swan, most famous for drawing Superman in the 1980s into the 90s, the era like one of the definitive Superman.
Not the mullet
pencilers.
Superman, but the
a little earlier than that.
Okay.
In the 80s, mostly Action Comics and Superman. Okay. Kurt Swan's a legend. So he drew, and Len Wein wrote a comic book. I forget the name of it, but I literally just read it recently, and it was in that era that you said, the 80s DC 30s 40s run. I forget what it's called. We got to look it up. I'll do that when you get back on it. But it was basically, it took place right after the voyage home, and it felt like that episode of Enterprise called Home, where it was almost like these vignettes catching up after the big activity of the Xindi War, or in this case, the voyage home. Like, what are the characters up to? And it was just like,
or even the home episode in TNG where they like kind of
post the best of both worlds. Exactly where I'm at in my rewatch right now. But it felt very redolent of both those episodes. That's cool. Written and drawn by two comic legends. So I'm gonna look up the name of that. So if you actually want to check out that issue, it's called Choices. It's number 37 of the Star Trek series published by DC Comics. Came out in April of 87. Kurt Swan, Len Wein, legends.
Awesome. And but Star Trek isn't the only thing that he worked on, obviously. He's like he's well known for something else.
So if anything, like Star Trek, you could almost see as like a kind of like a interesting like diversion for him. He worked extensively for the two major comic publishers, both Marvel and DC Comics. And Marvel, he created some of the most classic characters over there, the most famous of which being Wolverine from the X-Men, of course. And
he and David Cockrum were sort of like credited for reviving X-Men, basically.
Yeah, and then after them, it was Chris Claremont. And John Byrne, another Star Trek guy, that
was the mullet Superman, actually.
John Byrne mullet Superman, exactly. Yeah, that was huge. So he did Wolverine and Storm and a lot of those X-Men characters, Nightcrawler. And then I know more about the DC Comics, but he did a lot of he was an editor as well for many, many years there, which I think is cool, not just a writer, but he edited Detective Comics, some of the best stuff over there, as well as
he started like at age 20. He's like, it's funny because that's a theme with our show this week.
Back then, a lot of these guys started young, not right out of high school almost. Him and Marv Wolfman, another one of the legendary comics guys, they were best friends. They started together.
I think that's why it was like so shocking when you heard that he died, because he was only 69.
Yeah, so he wrote some of the best Green Lantern stuff with Dave Gibbons drawing, and he created Swamp Thing, another legendary character with the late great Bernie Wrightson, who also unfortunately passed away this year. A legendary horror comic book artist, worked a lot with Stephen King as well. So yeah, we miss Len Wein. We wish his family the best. We actually were with Len one night a couple summers ago. We did Star Trek trivia. He was in the room with us and some
Which
friends.
I didn't know until even this year.
I found out like as we were leaving, our friends Ashley and Jason were like, "That was Len Wein over there." I'm like, "Oh, no way!" So that was kind of fun. But
that's cool.
He'll be missed, and his contributions to the comic books aspect of Star Trek can't be underestimated.
Well, and in 2008, he was inducted into the Will Eisner Comic Book Hall of Fame. So it's great that he had that honor, at least. It's like he was definitely recognized, which is, a good thing, because a lot of people aren't recognized until after they pass away. So at least I think he knew that he he was appreciated, which is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was active podcaster too. If you want to check out the Nerdist Comics panel and Nerdist Writers panel, you can hear a lot of his thoughts on comics writing, TV writing. He also wrote a lot of the DC animated shows, Justice League, that kind of thing. So if you're into those DC cartoons, animated shows, check that out. Yeah. Rest in peace, Len Wein.
Well, and speaking of young people and working in Star Trek, the episode that we're going to be talking about today is the Pirates of Orion. And the writer of the episode is Howard Weinstein, who basically wrote this story as a short story in high school. And it went into like a fanzine called Probe. And he wanted to sort of pitch it to the animated series when he heard that it was coming out. His dad helped him find an agent who he recognized. I guess he'd went to high school or something with him, so he's like, oh, use this guy. And they got everything together, and they made sure that it went to Dorothy Fontana, and then Dorothy Fontana left the animated series. So he's like, he had this sort of like, it went 6,000 miles to just sort of like bleh, and die. And, so he was like, he said something to the effect of like, I suppose that there's a lesson in persistence here somewhere, that he didn't give up and he just basically resubmitted it, but he submitted it under his agent's name or something to that effect.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it went through, and they said, except for the ending, they basically took it, and Gene Roddenberry told Lou Scheimer that he called it one of their best first draft scripts. So
interesting.
And he was, when it was purchased, he was 19. So he's the youngest person to ever write a script for Star Trek. And when the show aired, he was just turning 20, and he was in like his college dorm, and they all got together and watched it on a screen in like the RA lounge or something like that. So,
good for him, man.
Yeah. So that was kind of cool. And he actually went on later to do some Star Trek comics. He did some of the 90s. Tests of Courage in 1994, which was a Captain Sulu story, and Revisitations in 95, which featured the return of Harry Mudd and Gary Seven.
And if there's one thing we know about Star Trek, Harry Mudd's going to return at some point.
Apparently. I if they could have brought him back in TNG, they would have, because I think they actually talked about it.
That's really funny, but that's cool that Gary Seven came back. I wouldn't mind. I know, I mean, so someone's gonna yell at me on Twitter, "You came back in the novels too."
Right.
Like, yes, I just think it's cool that like this random one-off thing. It's cool that he came back, and I hope Isis came back too. Not when you hear me say, just because
not a jihad.
I don't want to trigger some algorithm when I say I'm glad, and then Isis in the same word. I am glad that Isis the cat from oh, that's great when she at the end when she's sitting on the cat. Like, oh, God,
Simon Earth.
I should cosplay her. Wouldn't that be great?
That'd be awesome.
That'd be a great Halloween costume, Isis.
The sexy cat thing is already a
that's like a trope.
Anyways.
That's such like a Halloween trope.
Yeah, people are like, "What the hell are you? Like, why are you doing that?" It's like, "Oh no, this is a Star Trek thing."
I'm not those 5 other sexy cats in the room. Yeah. Yes, I am the Star Trek sexy cat.
Because you'd have to have the
specific collar that crosses. Yes. I know exactly. Yeah, that's so good. But she's got those cool like sparkly tights, like, and she has just like the look on her face. Like, that's such a great moment in a very weird episode of Star Trek.
What was a pilot for another show?
Yes, the what they call a backdoor pilot, when you use one show ending to set up another.
Howard, basically said that this show gave him kind of like that instant Trek credibility. So it allowed him to write a book for Pocket Books called Covenant of the Crown. And he also got a thank you credit in Star Trek The Voyage Home, speaking of Star Trek The Voyage Home earlier, after introducing the film's director, Leonard Nimoy, to the idea of including whales in the film. So not only do we have him to thank him for the Pirates of Orion, we have him to thank him for the one with the whales, at least that specific thing. So that's pretty cool. I don't know what else it would have been, but
right now that was what I was about to say. Like, I could just imagine like Nimoy, like, he's like, I got the whole story, and like he's pitching it to Paramount, but they have to go back in time to save the Venezuelan screeching toad. And the executives are like, excuse me? It's like, no, it's like this message about, the environment and like conservation and we're going to save the earth. And it's like this endangered species. And it's like this toad from Venezuela that won't stop screaming for the entirety of the movie. And
that's what the probe is.
That's what the probe, exactly. Like, like maybe whales. Like, you know what? Not when you hear the studio has notes, you get nervous as a writer. This time, all right.
Yeah.
I should preface this. This is not canon. This is not true.
We will have to see if we can get Howard on. I've sent him a Facebook request that is like sat unanswered for months now. So I'll have to go in and see if I can maybe ping him or one of our mutual friends and we can drop him a message.
Yeah.
But
what you shouldn't do is don't delete the friend request and then re-request because he'll notice that.
Well, maybe.
I mean, maybe it's good that he.
Yeah, I was like,
that,
maybe.
But when I like don't want to add somebody and I see they do that, I'm like, ooh, no.
Yeah,
don't do that.
I may have or may not have done that.
This has been Saturday morning social media etiquette.
Our show has so many helpful hints and just like in different divergence that I don't know. We could have all these spin-off shows. It'd be great. Another name that we have not seen until we're now, by the way, in season 2. This is officially season 2 of the animated series. Welcome. Is Bill Reed, who is the director. Before we had Hal Sutherland, well known in Filmation, but when this originally aired, nobody really knew that Bill Reed, outside of the people who knew that he actually did it, had directed these because they used stock credits. And the credits were from season 1. So it said director Hal Sutherland. So when the DVDs came out in 2006, they basically changed the title card to reflect his name. So his name is now on all 6 in the opening. The credits are still the same at the end, which I think it would have been easier to change it there than the opening. But
it's got that cool calligraphy. Like, it looks awesome.
Well, but that's just one screen.
Yeah.
All you have to do is just change it in like the others. Well, no, you're right. There's
his name. Hal
there's
Sutherland.
Calligraphy. Never mind. You're right.
It just looks awesome. I mean, they could do that for Bill's name, and they probably should have. That'd been awesome.
Right. That would have been interesting.
It's not his company.
Yeah, I'm saying I don't think he's that on that level of importance. So, so they fixed that, and speaking of it, this is going into season 2. Something I showed you before, where you were like, "Oh God, please turn it off." Jimmy Osmond, Donnie Marie's younger brother. The 70s were lousy with Osmonds. They used to do these things on Saturday morning where they would have a half-hour like preview show on a Friday night. Like, these are all the awesome cartoons that are coming up this weekend, and get up at 5 a.m. and start watching them. And it was Donnie Osmond as sort of like a carnival barker, hawking all of these new shows in horrible, horrible song.
Mr. Spock with the crew of the Enterprise set out on new adventure to the furthest part of the skies.
It's really weird because you would be having like Emergency +4, which is like these kids are trying to solve a bike stealing ring, which is about as deep as those shows got. And then you had Sigmund and the Sea Monsters, followed by the episode that we're going to be reviewing, where Spock is dying, Kirk is, negotiating with the pirates and trying to figure out, like, how much of the Prime Directive can he basically, or the alt Starfleet rules bend. It's like, it was such a tonal difference from all of the other cartoons. Then it went right into the Munsters. So that was a really interesting, do you remember those shows?
I know I don't remember the animated Munsters. I remember classic Munsters.
No, I meant those half-hour shows like before the Saturday morning cartoons. Did they do that when you were?
No.
They might have stopped that in the 90s because I remember they went into the 80s.
I'm trying to think of what the equivalent. I mean, the only thing that kind of even comes close to mind is when The Simpsons would do a clip show and they would have Troy McClure come out.
Yeah.
The great Phil Hartman. I feel like I've been saying the late great a lot this episode.
Yeah.
So about like 3 people, but like a lot of talented people that I like passed away, you guys.
Yeah.
Phil Hartman was incredible, but that was the closest thing I could think of was like they would like spoof something like this where you'd have some sort of genial TV type presenting clips to you.
Or they did the parody of the Brady Bunch Variety Hour, where they had like
God.
the replacement Lisa, which was like the same as the replacement Jan.
It was amazing, yeah, and they're all dressed up like beavers. That's like one of the best episodes of The Simpsons. It's incredible. It's the Simpsons spin-off spectacular.
Yeah.
So it's like 3 vignettes. The first one is I think it's Chief Wiggum PI, where Chief Wiggum and Principal Skinner go to New Orleans as detectives, and it's really funny. And then the second one is the Love-matic Grandpa, where Mo the bartender,
the Love-matic Grandpa.
Homer's dad, Bart's grandpa.
I drugged that on my memory.
It's that's so good. Oh my god! So he has a heart attack and goes into this love testing machine in Moe's bar. It's
like My Mother the Car.
It's exactly that. And then the third one is like the Simpsons Variety Hour, and like Lisa asked for more residuals, and they just replaced her. It's amazing.
Oh, I remember it's so funny because we went back probably like in the 90s sometime before kind of YouTube and everything. You know, like we found a videotape that had like all of the Brady Bunch Variety Hour on it, and you had this replacement Jan who was played by, I can't remember her name now. Jerry Taylor or something like this. It's some very Star Trek writer sounding name. And she had made some sort of comment. It's like, Jan was like, I wish I could be dead. And Marsha's like, yeah, why can't Jan be dead? I'm like, wow, this is really dark.
Oh, why can't I be dead? Yeah, why can't Jan be dead?
Would you just forget about Jan? Dad's the one who's dying.
You could tell that they picked somebody who was like slightly prettier than Eve Plum, maybe. Like they just wanted, she looked more like the other Brady girls in a way. It was very odd. It was just,
I feel like when you hear lines like that on television and you like look at the time frame, you're like, oh, this is when Hollywood started to get like into cocaine, and like get mean from cocaine. You know what I mean? Like that's what was happening behind the scenes.
Well, you had the Brady's dancing disco. It's very weird.
yeah, and then like also at the same time is like this is how things like the Star Trek holiday special happened.
Oh, the Star Wars holiday special.
Excuse me, yeah, of course.
I wish we had a Star Trek holiday special. That would have been amazing.
I would literally cut off both of our left feet to have that exist. But yeah, no, that's how things like this happen. Is like money. Advertisers with money, executives and advertisers with cocaine. And that's the 70s in Hollywood. This is how all these things happen.
We still have to find out about the Magics of Megas 2. We are setting that interview up still, so that is not gone. It's coming back. It's just Larry's finally, I think we all are at a place where we can get it together finally.
Yeah,
so
you know how I feel about that episode, so we'll save that for another day.
We'll probably all be on some sort of substance when we talk about that again.
And and listeners, you should too. Not that I'm advocating any,
no,
but substances are, water's a substance. Drink a glass of water and listen to Saturday Morning Trek. I can tell that half of the audience hasn't drank enough water today. I haven't drank enough water today. This is a weird episode.
Jolly good crash landing. Sir Greatfellow here with my grape-flavored oat cereal with sweet star bits. A rescue plane.
That Dummkopf, it's me, Baron von Raspberry, with my berry-flavored oat cereal with sweet star bits. I will show how to land in the storm. Von Raspberry's the very goodest.
Greatfellow's the grapest.
Von Raspberry.
Greatfellow.
For voices, we've got James doing of course Scotty and Eric's as usual, and he's also doing the Orion captain, who is Captain O'Shea, I believe. We have Majel Barrett doing her usual Nurse Chapel, and the computer voice, who she sounds a bit, what did we say? She sounded like maybe she was a little depressed or a little tired or something. The computer just was not quite up to snuff.
Yeah, as what do they say on mission log? Logie computer.
Yeah.
It's like, they're just a little tired.
Working.
What is the nearest strobolin supply planet to our present position?
Beta Canopus, 4 solar days away at maximum warp.
We have her also doing the Huron engineer. So that's cool. We have a female engineer of the Huron. We have George Takei, who doubles as both Sulu and the helmsman on the Huron, who's doing sort of like a high-pitched sort of younger cadet voice. Like Nichelle is Uhura, and Filmation producer Norm Prescott is the voice of the Orion lieutenant. The guy, I think, was just with his arms crossed the whole time talking. Did not animate him for some reason.
I'll tell you, I've never seen a picture of Norm Prescott, but I feel like if I was to see one, he would look exactly like the person who was animated.
Yep. They said that Norm may also be O'Shea, the captain of the Huron. They're not quite sure. I'm sorry. Before, James Doohan is actually the Orion captain. I did not mean the Huron captain. The voice is very similar to that of the lieutenant, so it's possible that he played both the lieutenant and the captain. It's not Doohan. They just don't know, and it's like, it's that time period where some things weren't written down, and we're the people working behind the scenes. Why do we have to? We don't want credit for it. We don't need, so they just filled in the voice, and it was never recorded anywhere. So you have to rely on.
I wish we had those kind of problems instead of fake news. Like, I wish the issue was like, we just don't have access to certain information, as opposed to like, no, we have access to so much information. People are knowingly putting like bull bleep out there.
Yeah.
I can't believe I just said bull bleep, guys. Like, I apologize. That was the lamest thing. Like, I didn't want to make you actually bleep me, and I wanted to say bull so bad.
Yeah,
anyway.
Imagine that we swore. Because
and when you imagine it, I was so cool. Like, I was like so casual about the way I said that word, and like, you're like, wow, that guy must swear all like that all the time.
Let's talk about the show, but real quick before we do, let me just give the audience a quick overview so you know what we're talking about. You should be watching it anyway, but here we go. We open as the crew of the Enterprise is putting the recent ship-wide outbreak of choreocytosis behind them and looking forward to playing diplomat at the dedication ceremonies for Den of Five's new Academy of Sciences. Suddenly, and I do mean suddenly, Commander Spock succumbs to the very disease which the rest of the ship has already recovered. Because Vulcans have copper-based blood, choreocytosis, which afflicts humans no more severely than it does pneumonia, which actually can be kind of serious, especially back in the 1970s, will prove fatal to Spock unless a supply of counteragent known as strobolin can be found in 3 days' time. The closest source of the drug is the planet Beta Canopus, which is 4 days away at maximum warp. However, Kirk arranges to have the USS Potemkin pick up some strobolin and hand it off to the freighter SS Huron, which is headed in the Enterprise's direction. Unfortunately, an unknown vessel attacks the Huron before the rendezvous can take place and relieves the freighter of her cargo of dilithium and strobolin. The Huron's Captain O'Shea doesn't know the identity of the attackers, but Kirk immediately sets out to discover it, while Spock grows ever weaker from the effects of choreocytosis. Following the Marauder ship's unique radioactive waste trail, the Enterprise soon catches up with the culprit, an Orion vessel, or Orion, as everyone seems to be insistent on calling them. After some bargaining with the Oreeons, Kirk and the Oreon captain agree to meet at a nearby asteroid, where the pirate leader has consented to hand over the strobolin. Though Kirk is aware he's walking into a trap, Spock's deteriorating condition leaves him little choice. The Oreons, look, I'm just going to start calling them Orions, secretly plan to double-cross Kirk by detonating a dilithium bomb on the geologically unstable asteroid. But Scotty beams the dilithium out of the device in the nick of time and beams Kirk and the Orions to the Enterprise as well. Captured and preventing from taking his suicide pill, Orion's operatives are supposed to kill themselves rather than be captured, the Orion captain and his crew now must face trial for the crime of piracy. Spock recovers from choreocytosis thanks to the recovered strobolin, although he has to endure Dr. McCoy's jabs about his green Vulcan blood turning out to be a liability. Awkward laugh as the Enterprise drifts out of frame. Okay, so Adam, what did you think of this episode? We just got finished watching it because we don't always watch it together, but we did this time.
This one's okay. It's not a real dud, but it's doesn't really pop either.
No, if you read Memory Alpha, they'll often say, this source gave it 1 out of 4 stars. This gave it 2 out of whatever. So sort of like it seemed like the average was sort of like a it was all middle of the road.
It's right down the middle.
Except for like 2, it was like the best ever, and 1 that was like the worst ever. I'm like, well, it's neither of those actually.
No, it's right down the middle, which is kind of why I like it in a weird way. Like, I like those boring TNG episodes. Like, if you watch Trek, like, and if you've seen every episode more than however many times, if you're listening to this podcast, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
where it's like, oh, I know this episode. It's not like good, but it's like very Star Trek. So I'm just gonna put it on and like just have it on.
It's almost like putting a mood on as opposed to an episode.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like pure moods. Enya, you know, it's like the Enya of Star Trek.
Well, you know, this has sort of got that. It's a very familiar two captains sparring off against each other, very TOS in that effect. That way, we've got classic Spock and McCoy banter. You know, Spock is sick, and so he, of course, makes a fantastic patient, which is always fun. In fact, we were talking about the there's the two clips or that seem to mirror each other from.
He just like passes out silently.
Oh yeah, that was great. There's when he finds out that he's or when we learn that he's sick, he just sort of like scrunches up his face and then just falls over. Doesn't say anything, just blup. That was great.
He doesn't even make a sound. He just keels over.
He just keels over, and they like, oh, okay. Well, this is basically the first time that being a Vulcan isn't an advantage, because they always used to play it up that it's like, oh, you know, he had the second eyelid, he has super strength, and he's got the
12 nipples.
Yeah,
he does not have 12 nipples.
No.
Okay, don't put that on Memory Alpha.
That's well, we won't know until Discovery.
Right.
That could actually be. That's where we did find that out.
We knew he was half Vulcan. Did you know the other half was Salot?
Yeah, right. He wasn't human. You know, we you know, he's got the Vulcan nerve pinch, so he's got all this stuff. But in this case, having copper-based blood is
right, because it's green.
It
would be copper's green.
The disease that is just like a common cold to us, basically, it stops his blood from being able to oxygenate. So he's having kind of like oxygen deprivation, which thinks he would be a little bit more. You would almost think he would be more like he was in Star Trek Beyond, when he was sort of like getting a little loopy from being, you know, out of it and having low blood flow and all that. But there's a spot in this that is it sort of mirrors the Star Trek Beyond, because it's like McCoy says, you know, this won't hurt a bit, Spock.
This won't hurt a bit, Spock.
An unnecessary assurance, Doctor. In addition to being untrue.
That's the last time I waste my bedside manner on a Vulcan.
And then you have that great scene from, which actually does have swearing. This is the swearing episode, from Beyond, where it's like, you know, all right, Spock, I got just one question for you. What's your favorite color?
All right, Spock. I just got one question. What's your favorite color?
I fail to see the relevance.
Ow! They say it hurts less if it's a surprise.
If I may adopt a parlance with which you are familiar, I can confirm your theory to be horse.
Bull bleep.
Bull bleep, yeah. You know, so he doesn't make a great patient, but then we have, you know, basically, it feels like it kind of, it's like the transition between that and the Orion part. It feels like there's like 3 episodes sort of glued together, and this might be maybe where you get the story came from a 19-year-old. Maybe it's the you know, it is better than a lot of them, but the pacing does seem to, like, maybe the story was longer at one point or something was shaved. I don't know. There was a little bit of a pacing issue, I felt.
It just sort of happens and it stops happening.
Yeah, that's a good way. There's no reason for it to go from one scene to the other. It just sort of does. I guess. I don't know. You know, you've got the 2 opposing captains trying to outthink each other. That happens after they go on the ship. It just kind of, things happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's like South Park has this thing where, you know, they used to end every episode with, I learned something today, you guys, and like they would start making fun of that. It's like, I think, you know, I kind of made the same comment on the Jihad, where it's like, well, that thing happened, and now we're going to go do this other thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like that it is interesting, because that is sort of the appeal of Star Trek in a way, of, you know, they lay it out. We're boldly going. We're exploring. We're this. We're that. Whatever. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like the thrill is gone. Like
they front loaded like all the really good TAS stuff up front, and there's like a kind of. I mean, there are a couple episodes coming up that are fun. It just feels like this. This has all the trappings of a good TOS episode, but something just didn't click.
My headcanon now is that this took place towards the end of the 5-year mission, which you could conceivably say it is,
Well, this is the 4th year, supposedly.
Right. So it's like, they're all kind of over it.
Yeah.
Like, that's how I...
Well, in the beginning, it's like, wouldn't it be great for us to be diplomats again or something? There was kind of like for a change, because it seems like they were like, well, because they were going to go help open a science academy or something like that, and so
Picard says the same thing, exact thing in Insurrection.
Yeah.
So again, towards the end of their journey as a crew. So I don't know, like this is none of this is explicit.
It's
on the
only
screen.
within 18 months that Spock goes off and goes to do his training on Vulcan that we see in the motion picture to go to the Kolinar. Yeah,
it's interesting. Like absolutely none of what I just speculated is made explicit on screen. But when you have something like
but when like 700 hours in the back of your head,
when you have when you have all the context for it, and you're given something which is like relatively thin, it's like you can start drawing these connections and making it more interesting than it actually is in reality.
Right. Well, and if you put it, add another even a different layer, you add the real life production and the people who are working on this and stuff. It's also coming to the end of the animated series. And, they've been doing, they really, to get the first season out, they really busted their, it was like, so this is the second season. Dorothy's gone, like that main driving force of being very Star Trek. She's sort of like, yep, I'm moving on to do something different now. I think she was going off to do the Questor tapes, actually.
If you guys haven't seen the Questor tapes, it's pretty wild.
Yeah. Basically, it's proto-data, or there's a lot of information, like, things that were pulled from that made it into data in TNG.
Watch all the non-successful Roddenberry stuff from the late 60s and 70s. It's really the trip.
And it feels like, okay, yeah, we're sort of like there. It's that same. That's the end of the journey for this. So you layer those two on top, and like you said, even though it's not on screen, we're making those inferences because of what we know. But yeah, it does feel a little bit like that.
And don't take it the other way either. We were talking before on the other side of the den, and we're talking about how certain Trekkies, I'm sure one or two who are listening feel this way about, like, you can't wrap their heads around Discovery takes place before TOS and it looks so much more the same crap that's been going on since Enterprise, and it's like you have all the context for it. Now, like, take that and lock it in a room and start watching new Trek.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you're talking about something like this particular episode or other ones that are a little more thin, you don't really have, if you're a Star Trek fan, you kind of need to work that muscle out in your brain. But I feel like with something like Discovery, you need to develop new muscles and let the part of your brain that can, make these cool connections and like appreciate different pieces of information from different, eras and writers and stuff. Let the new muscle develop, and don't get so hung up on this doesn't work with my continuity that, I think, it should be, or I've been led to believe it should be. Just watch the new show and enjoy it. This is my weird tangent rant, but just thinking about, how I constructed some weird, more interesting to me version of this episode with, no prep and, all this prep of watching the show. It kind of made me think of how, like I just said, I don't know, I'm starting to talk in circles at this point, but you guys get it. You're all smart.
Yeah, no, I it's interesting because I feel like Star Trek is sort of an idea that we all kind of hang our whatever we have on. So I don't see a problem with somebody's like, I see Star Trek as this, you see Star Trek as that. You can both enjoy it. You can both see something totally different. But the people who have problems with things like Discovery or the Kelvin movies or whatever are the people who just it's so rigid, and it's one thing. It's a nacelle with a specific color of a cap on the end of it, and it's like, and if it isn't that, then somehow you've broken it. And it's like, no, it's flexible. It's like Disneyland. Disneyland was never meant to be finished, and they're constantly changing it. And you had actually just gone to Disneyland, so it's like, it's not the same as it was in the 50s, but it never was meant to be. It wasn't like, it's not a time capsule. It's supposed to grow, change with the times.
That's a really good point, and I think people could take the same lessons about appreciating Disney and appreciating Star Trek. Like, there's so much to both of them that you could have 2 Star Trek fans and 2 Disney fans, and they would not necessarily overlap in what they enjoy. Like, we're talking about, before costumes and dressing up. Like, there's a certain subset of Star Trek fans that are probably one of the most visible is the Klingons, the guys and gals who like love Klingon culture, know the language, dress up, like, and like really, they were the proto cosplayers. You're not just wearing the costume, you're acting like that character.
Right.
That's not something that appeals to me. Whereas like, I really like Disney, but I like classic Disney. I'm not as big into like Pixar or the newer stuff per se. So I think that's the kind of thing that we can all do better as, is like, it's not Orville versus Discovery. It's like, I like certain things about both these things, and they're not competing for my fandom or what's more real to me, or what's more real to this objective, Gene's vision, which is another hour-long rant I could go on.
Yeah.
Which doesn't exist. Like,
no, I mean, well, if we're kind of like this, Discovery's coming out soon, so we, when you look back on these podcasts, you're like, why are they talking about this? Is because we're
in the middle of some stuff right now.
Yeah,
this isn't
exactly.
an evergreen. Like, if you're listening to this like in 20 whatever, years from now, we happen to be in the middle of it. But sorry to cut you off.
It will become we've got 2 days until it officially launches. You and I have seen it, so we only have ourselves and a few other people to talk to about this because nobody's seen it. We're very good about not spoiling things. Right. But Gene sent a message to Dorothy at the beginning of the animated series about, let's redesign the Klingons. Like, we never had the budget for it, and we couldn't change things because we had to have human people being in the costumes. Let's make them whatever we want. Let's make them more crustacean-like. Let's make them more squid-like. They're like, or let's get rid of the Klingons altogether and create a new, basically, main adversary for the Federation. So it's not like, oh, suddenly we're going against Gene's vision. Gene's vision was never like to only be people vaguely sort of racially insensitive, skin tone color, but like painted on there with the Fu Manchu, beard and mustache and stuff like that. That was not what Klingons were necessarily supposed to always be. In fact, I think when they did the motion picture, there was a comment once that he made. There's like, no, when you think back to the original series, just think that that's what they looked like.
Right. Yeah, that's a good one.
I mean, they did retcon that, so that isn't what happened. But
right.
Yeah.
Or like this episode, like I was like, oh, these aren't supposed to be the Orions because he's calling the Orions. And
but they are the Orions.
But they are the Orions. It's just like, yeah, so just go with it. Like, that's, I think, the big lesson to be learned is that, like, just go with it. Roll with it, baby, like Steve Winwood. But I think these Orions are cool. Like, their helmets are cool. They got these collars. We're talking about how cool, like, their ship is, like, their roof.
And that's, I think, Bob Klein, that was one of his favorite things that he designed. He loved that ship.
Not just the exterior, but the interior, like the roof. It looked very cool, like just like the design of it.
It almost feels like if you were to see this brought to life in like a real, like in a filmatic, like in real life, that the dome has almost got like a star
planetarium
sort of thing to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that, like Astrometrics Lab planetarium.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I remember going to the New York Planetarium when I was a kid. But
yeah, like maybe that's how they plot. So yeah, I thought that was pretty cool.
To go off we were talking about a lot about nostalgia and like being a kid and dressing up or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't like I wasn't like obsessed with toys and like collecting toys in the way that I think a lot of other kids are at that age. But looking at this episode, I'm like, God, I wish I kind of want like that ship, like both ships, new ships were very cool.
The last 2 episodes we've talked about that. We wanted the land vehicle,
toyetic, and I wanted all of them as plush toys. Yeah, we had to put all the plushes in the thing. Yeah, so I think that this is not by accident, mind you. This is very much by design of like, we are the kids with the cereal in front of the television. Like, oh, I want that.
Yeah.
You know, this is very much a by design thing for sure.
Yeah.
Dr. Bones McCoy, caring for their health and welfare. Scotty, chief engineer. Mr. Spock, the Vulcan first officer. Lieutenant Uhura, the communications officer. And, new for 1976, the aliens, Klingon. Their evil threatens the universe. Gorn, half human, half beast. Charon, is he good or evil? Neptunian, dangerous in space and in his own watery habitat. And the Keeper, his incredible intellect threatens the Enterprise. The Star Trek Alien.
Going back to the story a little bit, just to kind of polish it off, Uhura gets to go on the landing party, and aside from just hailing frequencies open, she gets to retrieve data tapes from the bridge, which is another that's interesting. The ship, the USS or the SS Huron, there is a visual mistake that has USS because it's a freighter. It's just SS, and that's also why they have different patches on there. They don't have the standard Starfleet Delta. If you're a freighter or a merchant marine, you can have your own design. Apparently, that was a memo from Gene. That their bridge is kind of interesting. They have sort of like this condensed. It was like longer and thinner and taller, and nobody knows really where in the ship it is. Assuming it's like at the top of the ship, but not exactly where. But we really liked that ship. We thought that was a pretty cool ship too.
Oh yeah, it looked like kind of looked like a phaser with all this stuff on it, or like a dustbuster, like a really jacked up dustbuster.
Well, it feels like maybe those are like sensor arrays or something. I don't know. They're
like, yeah, storage compartments for the freight, or like specialty storage, like gravity adjusted for like heavy density storage. Like, I imagine if you're like if you're a freighter in space and like you're like freighting all this like specialty like cargo, like you'll need special like holds and attachment. I don't know. I'm just kind of riffing, but trying to justify why this ship looks insane.
Well, and that's it'd be an interesting like Trek yards to check out or something like that. But it does feel like the ship, the Huron and the Antares that we saw from I guess that was retconned into the Ultimate Computer, but the one that we saw, the freighters that we saw in the Tribble sequel in the animated series, they both feel like they might be modular, like things could pull apart and click. So we know the bridge module is modular. So.
DS9 was originally supposed to kind of be that way.
Really?
I think, if memory serves, the idea with some original concepts of DS9 would that be, it was like, in the way that it was a Cardassian station that was then, taken over and become like, it was going to be like that, but in the way that like there would be just different layers and like different parts of the station have been built over and almost look like kind of like a mishmash and just like an evolving thing with all these different cultures having built upon each other. And
interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. And then when you start to see like the concept art of it, it's like, oh, I get why this didn't work. Because then what Rick Berman then said to Delgado and the other designers was like, I want someone to like look across the living room and be able to see the TV for a half second out of the corner of their eye and see it and be like, that's Deep Space Nine. And then that's, you
if
think
it's a
about
hodgepodge, it's probably not.
Yeah, there's no way to take that design idea and translate it to something that's instantly recognizable without looking directly at it. So, for what eventually came out to be, I think they nailed his directive.
Yeah.
But that was kind of the modular sort of evolving ship was something they tried again later.
Huh. We get to hear Kirk say sabotage in his sort of like odd way. And when Christine was on the bridge, she was pretty blasé about the injuries. Like, oh, this guy needs to get surgery. He'll be fine. Like, maybe she should have said that as soon as they beamed in. I don't know. It's like the animated series has a weird way of having everyone wait their turn to say their thing, even if it's really important. It happens mostly with medical, because when we saw Eye of the Beholder, there was like, oh, by the way, our crew person's sick. Maybe you could take a look at them. It's like she's had like a massive fever, and she's like, oh yeah, she's really sick. Like, maybe that's the first thing you should have said,
right?
But
it was probably like 2 audio tracks, and they were like, we don't have time or money to start overlapping this. But
yeah, that's probably true. Oh, speaking of audio, we had a really weird like tape stretch in the like his
got kind of pitched up, pitched down real quick.
Interesting.
They're gone, sir. Gone.
There was I don't think it's on Netflix anymore, but when they first put all the Star Treks on Netflix streaming, some before they put the remastered TNGs up, some of them were from like kind of like iffy tape dubs.
Oh, okay.
And I remember very clearly it was Descent Part 1, where after they had that holodeck thing with Stephen Hawking and all that.
Oh, right, yeah.
They started playing the TNG theme, and it was like, the tape was wet. It was like great. Like, I think it's still on YouTube. You can actually...
Oh, that's great.
YouTube, Netflix TNG Descent, and I think you can still see it. It was really interesting, because that was like... I remember I watched that like right when I was getting into Star Trek, and I'm like... Oh, like the Borg are back? Like, is this like they? And I was like, because that's kind of a thing now. Like,
exactly.
Like, to give you an example, like Intermarried Darkly, where they'll kind of futz with the with the theme, to give you like this is going to be a dark episode, different episode. No, it was just a bad. It was cool though. So that was
great.
That was what that was on this episode.
Interesting. Yeah, exactly. We basically have like I said, Kirk fighting the other captain. We go nice little. He's going to blow up the asteroid that they're on, because all unsuccessful Orion missions are supposed to end in suicide.
Yeah, he had a cyanide caplet.
Yeah,
and they just like yanked it out of his hand, which is really funny. Like, I think now, like when you see that in movies, it's like usually it's like they have like a false tooth and they just chomp on it or something. But I don't know. Like, I guess he had it in his hand. It was kind of weird.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was funny because it is like such a trope of like, oh, he's gonna kill himself, but they stopped him.
Yeah, because it always happens. Like he does always kill himself.
And so it's the pills in the mouth.
Yeah.
I think they probably saw this episode. They're like, nah, we got to figure it out.
Yeah. So they beamed him back up. Then he tried to kill himself, and then we're done, and we go kind of basically wrap it up with and end with McCoy, Spock, and Kirk in sickbay. And McCoy is just really like, if it was speciest or racist or whatever you want to call it, but it's like you have to admit, Spock, that it would be better if you were a human. And he's just like, no, I like my physiology. It's sort of like, and then they do a really goofy like laugh, and it's like it would be like one of the classic freeze frames. That was an awkward ending. What he says is like what they said in the original series, but it just had a weird edge to it. I don't know. Maybe it's the way I interpreted it, but it just felt a little stronger than normal. It was a little too on the nose, maybe.
I mean, the great thing about DeForest Kelley is, he's great. Like, he has some of these, like, the things that Larry Nemechek loves to talk about, of like his subtle things of like, when he's like miffed and he can't respond to Decker, he just kind of like stands up a little bit on his feet and then walks away, like on the balls of his feet. The subtle things that McCoy does are really good, and I feel like if this was live action and he was like railing on him, and then like they did have that laugh, he would have like a knowing wink or like he would spoof Spock's raised eyebrow. That's
true.
That's what McCoy would do. He would raise his eyebrow like Spock would to let him know, like, yeah, like, I saved your life and I'm going to bust your balls about it, but like, I care for you.
Oh, and we did get the scene in the middle of this episode where he's just like, I always make fun of him, that walking encyclopedia with pointed ears, basically. But it's like, I love this guy. I don't want this to happen to him.
Yeah, I think based on the fact that it's like, I wouldn't be surprised if he recorded 2, 3 at the most of that tops of that take. And then they moved on. One. I would 100% believe that's for a lot of these lines, I would absolutely believe if you told me with a straight face, that's the only take they did. I'm like, sure, absolutely. And then they, they don't have the time, money, or wherewithal to animate the nuance of a DeForest Kelley eyebrow raise. Like, I can 100% imagine this playing stronger in live action.
We even noticed that a couple scenes where Sulu didn't look quite right, and Kirk didn't even look right.
Yeah, it was just a little off,
So
I think that the characters in universe were over it. Maybe they were starting to be over it out of universe.
My face is just going to look different. Whatever.
We give him one of the Herculoids faces. Doesn't matter.
Well, talking about wasn't the only thing we've been doing on Trek FM this week. Here's a listen to some of the things you may have missed elsewhere on the network.
Previously on Trek.fm, the 602 Club.
And this is happening a lot more in the Star Wars books, and I think it's because it allows them freedom, which is to do books that become character studies. And I think it's very clear that this book, in a lot of ways, is a character study of who this person is and what it is that causes the actions that we see in The Force Awakens to make more sense.
Stage 9, a podcast about the people who make Star Trek.
By getting people like Braga to come on board and work on this show, what they're going to be doing is deconstructing that thing that they did for all those years on Star Trek.
Earl Grey.
Is there anything else we need to add, or do we think that's the...
Are we going to cure Riker, or?
Oh shoot! I forgot about Riker. Yeah, sure, fine. We'll keep him around.
Yeah, we've cured Riker, and then for me, this would or not.
Meta Treks.
Troy's quarters, Data's quarters.
They're very Spartan.
They're very Spartan.
In fact, Data's girlfriend even says they're Spartan, right?
Yes. And so what does she do? She brings him stuff.
A trinket to fill it up.
to fill it up.
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
So check out the shows and get in on the daily Trek Talk. You'll find them at iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spreaker, and the Windows Podcast Directory for Xbox and Zune. You can visit our website at trek.fm and view our podcast directory and stream all of our shows right from the website. We'd also like to invite you to leave us a rating and review on iTunes. Not only does it help us know how we're doing, it also helps other people find the show. Before we go, I'd like to thank our patrons, Norm Lau, Eric Extreme, and Juke Him. Thank you for your support. And if you want to become an associate producer of a Trek FM show, all you need to do is become a patron of the network at the $25 or more level. Go to patreon.com/trekfm and find out how you can become part of the team. That's patreon.com/trekfm. So, Adam, when you're not searching out monster cereal, where can we find you on the network?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram, Adam Drosin, Drosin. You can't spell Drosin without sin.
And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at GeekFilter. And I'm also occasionally on our Discovery podcast, The Edge. And I'm also the art director of the network, so you'll see some of my work on our cover art and stuff like that. And pretty much, I'm just floating around everywhere on Twitter now these days. It seems like that's where I spend a lot of my time. And I'm in the Babel conference. And so I think it's time to start putting up our Halloween decorations in the wood panel den. I mean, we only have them like a month, so we have to get going.
I've got to run to the store, get some more fog juice for the smoke machine, start putting together our costumes. If I run into any Frankensteins or Draculas along the way, I will send them over to the wood panel den.
Okay. And I am going to run out and see if I can get some of that monster cereal. And while I'm at it, I'm going to, I'll try not to drive with my plastic mask on because that's really, very hard to see out of that.
Yeah, don't text and drive. Don't wear your plastic Spock mask when you drive.
And remember, there is a series.
Yeah, you know what?